In times of changing world politics, we need to humbly listen to those for whom civic freedoms have never been taken for granted. These thoughts are from our interviewer and journalist Liselott Lindström.
Although civil liberties are being restricted around the world, Kenya's civil society is growing stronger. State oppression does not silence it, but rather gives rise to a new kind of courage and solidarity.
To speak on this issue, we have the honor to welcome on stage a human rights defender and lawyer, Michelle Mwelesa. She is an advocacy specialist at the Civic Freedoms Forum.
Mwelesa is interviewed by journalist Liselott Lindström, who previously lived in Nairobi, Kenya.
The program is interpreted into Finnish Sign Language, and we start the program with a video of a Gen Z protest at the end. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. We start the program with a video of a Gen Z protest that ended in an occupation of the Kenyan parliament in 2024.
With a lot of respect, my friend, Mr. President, please be a decent human being. Kuwa muungwana, kuwa na shukurani. Sisi ndio tulikusaidia.
They fear you because you are young. They fear you because you are the future. How fearful they must be that they shoot you, children. How powerful you must be that they fear you so much. You are powerful because you are the generation that will be free. The violence, the beatings, the torture, the killings, all this is the bad pain of our free nation. Please, God, may I live to see it. But if I don't, I see it now on your faces, like the light of the rising sun, and my heart leaps within me as if I too was young again. And I know, oh yes, I know, freedom is coming tomorrow.
Sasa unaanza kunipeleka nini? Hata utanifanya nini? Bora usiue watoto.
These pictures that you just saw, they could have been from anywhere in the world, really. Autocracy is spreading, democracy is in decline, and more people take to the streets in many countries. And in Kenya, protesting has sort of become the new normal. And I'm so happy to have Michelle here to speak of her experience straight here in Helsinki. And Michelle, can you start by telling us what happened in that video?
Thank you, Liselott. In this video, we are seeing the 2024 protests that happened in June 25th. Actually, it was a series of protests beginning 18th to 25th of June, where Kenyans, mostly the young Kenyans, came out to protest against high taxation and the high cost of living. And the peak of this protest was when Kenyans occupied parliament. They stormed into parliament when the finance bill was being passed. And that's why we can say that this was one of the deadliest protests that has happened in Kenya since independence.
And seeing people storming the parliament, what did that day mean for you as a Kenyan?
I think personally as a Kenyan, it was my proudest moment, because at that point we felt like we were taking back our power, the power given to us through our constitution. Because our constitution says that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya. So at that point, we felt like we're taking it back, and it was a very proud moment for me.
And Michelle, we asked you to send us your graduation photo, and you're a human rights defender, you're a lawyer, you work with the Civic Freedoms Forum, or CFF, in Kenya, and it's a platform uniting 12 Kenyan civic society organizations that are working to protect democracy, civil liberties, and human rights. And it was actually founded quite recently, before the last elections in 2021, but showing that the civic society in Kenya is very strong. And for you, did you know when this photo was taken that human rights is what you want to work with, or when did you realize that this is the path you want to take?
It wasn't at this point when I was being called to the bar, but it began way before, when I was still in primary school, back in 2007, when Kenya had a very difficult point in our elections. We had post-election violence in 2007, and during this period we witnessed a lot of human rights violations, and even as a child I saw and I was like, I wanted to be part of the solution, and that was one of my very initial drive to be part of human rights defending movement.
And I think the last year and events around the world has finally taught us here in Finland as well that civic liberties are actually something you can't take for granted. You have to constantly fight for them. And we have a lot to learn from Kenya here in Finland as well. And here you can see the situation now around the world. We have a lot more countries that are oppressed, repressed or obstructed than are open or even narrowed. And here we can see the situation now in Kenya. I used to live in Kenya for 4 years, but I moved back to Finland a bit before the last election in 2022. And since then we have seen a deterioration of the situation in Kenya, and it's so sad to see. Kenya has moved from obstruct to oppressed, as you can see there down in the picture. And Michelle, the civic space in Kenya has been shrinking for the last couple of years. How did you start to notice that things are getting worse?
Historically, civic space in Kenya has been rated depending on who is in power or the current regime in power. So like the last 5 years, since 2022, when our current president was sworn in, things started going downhill from then. And I think we can all attribute this to the person who is there, because we have not known him to be the best defender of human rights. As a matter of fact, he was indicted as part of the violations of the 2007 post-election violence at the International Criminal Court. And so when you have that kind of person in power, it goes to say that human rights will not be a priority for him. So that's why we are witnessing such a situation in Kenya, which is quite unfortunate.
And when I think of Kenyans and my Kenyan friends, I think of people that are very brave and not afraid to speak their mind at all. And for me, what I wish for you all here in the audience to take with you today is inspiration from Kenyans on how to defend these rights that are so precious to us. And also some things to watch out for. What are the warning signs to look out for? We will go through a couple of cases showcasing Michelle's work in a little bit, and we'll get some ideas from Michelle and CFF also on what can be done. But Michelle, as you said, people knew that where this president came from, what his background was. Were people still shocked to see that he was taking Kenya down an authoritarian path?
I think even with his CV or his reputation, Kenyans still expected him to do his part. And even though we respected democracy by actually accepting what a majority of Kenyans wanted through voting, we still expected him to respect human rights, to defend them, and also to respect the Constitution. So it came as a shock, but also not as a shock, because at the end of the day, we want to be represented well and to be led well by the people in power.
And I think here in Finland, many have seen Kenya as quite a stable country, but now things are starting to change. But in Kenya, institutions have been very strong, and you also, Michelle, have pointed out that the Kenyan constitution is very strong. And you're working with dozens of cases where civil society is oppressed, and we picked a few for you just to show how authoritarianism starts to seep into a country. And the first case we have is restrictive laws. So one of the first things that happen is often that a government starts to pass restrictive laws that at first sight can sound quite innocent or even needed, but then when you start to examine them a bit closer, you realize that they have a deeper meaning and perhaps a more complex meaning. And from Kenya, we have a very fresh example, the Computer Misuse Act. So Michelle, tell us, what was that about?
The Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act was a legislation, or rather a law, that was passed to ensure that the online space is safe. As we know, currently our lives are majorly online, and so it was important for us to have a law that protected that space. However, in the fine print, in the fine lines, there was a provision that tried to kill dissent or the freedom of expression by ensuring that if somebody or someone put out information that was against the government or was not palatable to the government or politicians or any leader in power, then that person could face prosecution. And as civil society, as Kenyans, we saw that that law was not, it was a very authoritarian law, and it was setting us back from where we were 20, 30 years ago before even the internet was there. So in general, it appeared to be a good law to protect the online space, but there was a certain provision that was not very good for human rights.
And what did CFF then do, and what happened with the law?
After that proposal came for that particular provision, CFF and amongst other civil society organizations moved to court to quash this provision. And it's fortunate that the judiciary, in this case, the court was with us on our side, and they said that that provision was unconstitutional and it was declared unconstitutional, and therefore it's not part of the law anymore. So that is a win for human rights.
What do you think we can learn from this case? Did it affect somehow people's will to speak up?
Anyone who knows Kenyans knows that Kenyans are very resilient. And even in the face of oppression and resistance, we are still resilient. And so we never really felt afraid to speak out. We continued speaking out. We continued writing, tweeting, doing our videos and everything online, even in the fear or in the wake of you being arrested and abducted because of what you have put outside there. So the resilience in Kenyans was still there, even when they tried to repress us through laws.
And the next case is about the right to organize. And another way for governments often to stifle dissent is to say who is allowed to fight for human rights, who is allowed to gather and organize. And this case is about LGBTI+ rights. And this is a case I've actually followed very closely also in Kenya, because I did a documentary about LGBTI+ people fighting for their human rights in Kenya. And what struck me was that they were so brave, not only fighting the system, but also fighting the prejudices among the people. And the case we have now is about the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. They were fighting for their right to exist in the courts. Michelle, tell us, what was that case about?
The case started 10 years ago. It's something that has been gone up the ranks in the judicial system for a very long time, and it eventually landed at the Supreme Court bench. Essentially, the case was about refusing organizations that defended the rights of the LGBTQ community and their right to organize, to register as an organization. And so as the human rights defenders fought for this right through the courts, eventually at the Supreme Court level, it was declared that it's not constitutional to deny such organizations the right to register and organize. So the Supreme Court, again, defended human rights in this respect, the freedom of association, and allowed organizations that defended the LGBTQ community to register and organize legally.
So what did CFF do to support their case?
We were part of the online community that was pushing, because sometimes you also need the word to be out there, not just through the courts. So us with other organizations, we supported the anchor organization that went to court through the online campaigns to push the word and to put the word out there. Yeah.
And what do you think we can learn from this? What did this do to the civic space in Kenya?
I think the biggest lesson that you can pick here as people, as human rights organizations, is sometimes to also have a little faith in the system, because sometimes you can feel like it won't work, but it works. Because in this case, we never thought that the courts would support the case, even though we knew that it was in the law side. And also we knew the underlying issues, for example, Kenya being a very conservative country, we knew that it was a long shot, but we had faith in the system, and sometimes the system works. So we can also go through the legal system apart from being on the street and being activists outside. We can also go through the system.
But Michelle, you've also been telling me that there's been some cases in Kenya now where the politicians don't adhere to what the courts are deciding. What can we do if the independence of the courts is being compromised?
You know, Liselott, I think that is the question that even us as Kenyans, we are trying to answer, because at the end of the day, the courts is usually our last resort, or rather, like we have seen in the video before, we felt like our last resort was storming parliament so that our voice could be heard. But in this case, we could also go through protest or go through the courts being our last resort. But again, we are left at the mercies of the people that we elected, because at the end of the day, if they don't follow the law, we are left out in the cold. So that is something that we still do not have an answer, but we just pray and hope and also vote correctly that the people we vote for will go by the law.
Mm. And the third case we want to highlight, it's the people, like Michelle, the human rights activists, who are actually doing the work. And how human rights defenders are treated, it's often a measurement of how free a country is. And if those speaking up to violence and corruption are silenced, it usually means something bigger. And being a human rights defender in Kenya, it gets harder and harder. Before, Kenya used to be a safe haven for human rights defenders, and also from countries around Kenya, neighboring countries. Human rights defenders fled to Kenya. But now Kenya has also been deporting some human rights defenders from other countries in the region. So, Michelle, how is the situation for human rights defenders in Kenya at the moment?
I would say it's not very good. In the past, historically, Kenya has been that safe haven where when human rights defenders are being persecuted in other regions, they would come in Kenya and would welcome them. But currently, we are seeing a situation where they are being deported, and also there is this transnational agreement, unwritten agreement between countries where when this quote-unquote stubborn human rights defender is in this country, then you can deport them to this country. So it's no longer safe. I've seen colleagues that I've worked with, for example, Martin, who was working in Kenya Human Rights Commission, a Ugandan working in Kenya. He was deported just around the time of the protest, and because he was being vocal, he was deported. There was another one from Open Society who was also deported just because for being part of civil society. So it's something that we are afraid of, because the government is looking for any way of getting you out and to stop you from working as a human rights defender. So that's the current situation. It's not very good.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what is CFF doing to help human rights defenders?
One of the ways is for creating platforms where human rights defenders can learn, can speak out, and also the safe haven where they feel like they're targeted, we can extract them and move them in a safe zone or safe area. We are working with organizations like Defenders Coalition, which specialty is working with human rights defenders, and is also a CFF member. So they're very well equipped in doing that. They also train human rights defenders with defense mechanisms, and also there's also a legal fund in case they're arrested and things like that. Mm. Yeah.
What do you think we can learn from this?
I think the biggest lesson that we can take in general, right, is for us to always use our voices because they are heard, and also to remain resilient, because I think that's the biggest lessons that Kenyans has been teaching other people, especially our neighbors in the East African region, to be more resilient, to be more loud, to not be quiet when their rights are being violated. Eventually, you grow, the people who are supposed to listen, they will listen, and we hope that the results will be good. Yeah.
And global spotlight on these issues also has an impact, because even autocrats care about the image they have globally. And we have a nice little video greeting now from a human rights defender in Kenya, Njeri, who works for the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission. That was the second case that we talked about.
When I think about challenges of human rights defenders, the most apparent is usually threats to our lives, threats to our well-being and to our safety and the safety of the communities that we work in. But I think on a more personal level, I think realizing that we consistently have to keep hope alive, regardless of the changing context, regardless of the negativity that surrounds us sometimes, and regardless of the difficulty within which we navigate our work. And sometimes that's exhausting to people. But I think often we're renewed, especially when there's progress in the work that we do. For example, in Kenya, after a 10-year-long battle in court, we were able to successfully get a decision that allowed us to register our organization with the names gay and lesbian in the title. This was a really hard process. It was an emotionally exhaustive, but financially exhaustive, resource-wise exhaustive process. But the win at the end and our ability to open up the space for queer Kenyans to be able to have organizations really made it worth it for us. Thank you.
So, hope is a powerful tool, I think, was Njeri's message to us. And now to wrap things up, there is an intensive time coming to Kenya. We have elections again next year, and lots of things are happening in Kenya already with regards to the elections. What are you going to work with, Michelle, now when you go back to Kenya?
Yeah, during this transitional period, political transition, it's a very sensitive time for Kenyans because one, the civic space becomes even more restricted. And two, it also brings back the bad memories of 2007, 2008 post-election violence. So the work that we're doing right now, first of all, is to ensure that we get as many people to register to vote as possible. There is a current campaign being done by other human rights defenders called the Tuko Kadi campaign. Basically, it's for people to encourage people to register to vote come next year in August for the general elections. And also, we are also encouraging people to just know who they are voting for, not just to vote or just to register, but also to keenly and carefully look at the people that they're going to vote for next year.
And if we look at these challenges as a global issue, what do you think people in Finland can do to support Kenyans? How can we cooperate over borders?
I think the biggest thing that the global community, people in Finland, that can help us with is when we put out a call out there, a call for support to get our voices out there. You could join us in that, because I know when we become a lot, or when there's a lot of us saying the same message, it becomes easier and louder to get it out there. So when a country in distress calls out for help, for support, please join in. Nowadays, it's very easy because we have social media platforms, so it's easy to join on a campaign and to support. So be there, listen, be a listening ear, and support when we call out for support. Yeah.
Michelle, you told me that sometimes you're also afraid doing your work. What makes you want to keep going anyway?
First is I only have one home. That's one. So when you don't be part of the solution, then where are you going to run to? And number two is who is supposed to help? Who's supposed to be part of the solution if I am afraid to do it? So if not me, then who? If not now, then when?
Thank you so much, Michelle. A big round of applause for Michelle. And if any one of you wants to have a more private chat with Michelle, or wants to ask any questions about her work or about the situation in Kenya, we're going to go up there outside, just outside, and then we can talk more. Thank you so much.